Right. Welcome. Today, Lauren, Christine, and I are going to be talking about sun transits 30 and 55. So during the conversation, we're going to explore around and see what comes up, see what we can learn, and see what we can play with over the next two periods of 5.5 weeks. So, Christine, can you fill us in on those gates so that we can get started?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Lois. So yes, today we are actually entering into gate 30, which is the gate of feelings in human design. The hexagram is the clinging fire. And this is another one of those hexagrams that is fire over fire. So it's the fire trigram over the fire trigram. So it's a fiery energy, right? And fiery in like a very emotional way, right? This is truly a gate in our emotional solar plexus. It is one of the gates we talked about briefly in one of these episodes where we are in a section of the mandala that's all about emotion, right? And we're also very closely entering into Pisces in the zodiac, right? So we're coming into this very well, right up through the equinox, actually. It's going to be emotion after emotion, different emotion after different emotional gate. So this is kind of the second. We just came off 49, which was this kind of revolution. So everybody may have had a sense this past week of like feeling more emotional or feeling more fired up about things because this is this fiery energy. And so we have more of the same in this gate. And in the gene keys, the shadow of this is desire. And so there may be in this, for next 5.5 days, there may be things that show up in your view that seem that you really want, right? There's this energy around wanting things and desiring things. And as I was doing some of the reading for this, I was reading Richard Rudd's 64 Ways, which I really love. It's such a beautiful contemplation on all of these energies. But he talked about as desire as a projection that moves out from us, right? And so it was an interesting, like, oh yeah, our desires, like it's a seeking, right? It's a yearning, it's a longing, but it's all about something we feel we're lacking, right? So paying attention to what we feel like we don't have enough of, or the things that we want and why we want them over these next 5.5 days might be a really interesting practice.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, first of all, I have to say, since last night, maybe this morning, I have felt so buzzy, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it must be like emotions running through me that I
Mm-hmm.
can't quite name. Can't quite get this head earphone in. Sorry. Um, but the thing that comes up for me and listening to what you say, it's this desire, it's things that we want to fill what we're lacking, and there's something in this about how will we feed ourselves, right? How do we, um, and because we might want the new car because we feel we're lacking and it'll complete us, but what is it that's lacking that maybe we need to feed in another way? And we all have those cravings, right? And but if we give in to them one after another, we'll never know what it is that's underneath them. And I think this is a really cool opportunity in these 5 days to come into what's underneath those desires.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was reading, I was struck by the sort of this pull between things being either good or bad. It's like this we have our experiences, and our experiences are experiences, but then we label them good or bad. And this tendency to want to get the bad ones to go away and the good ones to keep on going. Let's just keep, have the good times roll. And so so then there's this attachment to uh like I want to keep this thing that I can't keep because everything is impermanent. You know, even the most wonderful thing that happens, it has its period of time and then it's done. And so there's the looking for sort of this high all the time of wanting things to be wonderful. And we're so much swimming in that soup in our world, in the like people all posting the wonderful things that are happening and making it look like their lives are just all a great thing from one morning till night. And then other people sitting there going, oh, I don't have that.
Mhm.
And so then there's this lack that shows up.
Yeah.
And then so there's all this suffering that's being created from this.
Yeah. Yeah. This morning when I was reviewing the I Ching, I had a big fire built. It's real cold and snowy up here in New Hampshire. And thinking about the fire over fire and then feeding in the wood to keep the fire going, and understanding the fire can't exist without the wood, right? It requires both. We can't have the desire without the thing, right? Or the person, or whatever. It takes both. And it seems that part of this lesson could be living with the two, right? Living with both, and not falling too far into one or the other, right? To find that balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the gene keys too, like the gift of this energy is lightness, right? And so it is like this literal light, right? Like fire gives us light, but lightness and not attaching too much to anything, right? Like not being weighed down by our desires, right? Allowing this thing that Lois was talking about, right? Like things come and go, right? Even the good times go, right? And that's by design. And holding on to any of it too much weighs us down, right? And so we can't achieve this lightness if we are constantly trying to hold on to something that by nature, its very nature, is going to go, right? Is going to change.
So to hold it lightly,
Right.
different use of light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting that yesterday was the full moon in Leo, and this, all about what is your dream, right? And what will you pursue? And we come right into this time then of checking in with ourselves. Is what is our dream, right? What do we feel? And Christine, when you shared this whole period that we're in of this emotional time, I think it's interesting because before we act, we have to know how we feel. And so each one of these gates seem to be giving us that opportunity is, oh, how do I feel about this? Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, I think it's interesting that right now everybody on the planet is emotionally defined, right? We have the North Node and I think Neptune in gate 36, and then we have Jupiter in gate 35. And so we have this channel that's lighting up everybody's solar plexus right now. And so we are living, and I think if we look out in the world, we can see like there's a ton of emotional waving going on, right? Everybody is somewhere on this path right now. And that follows through all the way through the end of March. So not only are we working through this little, section of the mandala in this emotional space, we actually all have this emotional definition going on inside our bodies energetically too, right? So I expect the next, up through the solstice to be a pretty rockin' time for everyone. you know,
Between
and a
now
real
and
opportunity, right? A real opportunity to learn. Like, I don't have emotional definition, right? It's a great space for me to be like, oh, this is kind of what it feels like to slow down and pay attention to what my emotions are telling me, right? And to feel what I'm feeling. And so an opportunity for everyone to do that.
I was thinking about what you said, Lauren, about like the holding, being able to hold both. And so the yin yang symbol showed up for me, and how in that symbol you have the light and the dark, but there's also always an element of the other inside, like there's the dark spot in the white side and the white spot in the dark side. And just in like recognizing that you couldn't spend all your time in the light. I mean, it would be like living in Iceland in the summer, right? Where you have to shut the light out because you have to have the dark. So it'd be interesting for people to sort of watch when there's almost like, where are they finding the balance, and where's there too much of something, even too much of something good?
Yeah, which actually walks us right up to the next gate in 55. I don't know, should we go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, because the gate of gate 55 is the gate of spirit and the hexagram of abundance, right? And so it is all about all kinds of good, right? 55 is this really beautiful energy. Um, and it's the only gene key that actually repeats a word. Usually you have a shadow, a gift, and a city, a highest expression. And usually there's three different words, but in gate 55, there was no other word. So it's victimization in the shadow and then freedom and freedom, right? And this idea that we are all seeking freedom. And whatever it is we're seeking in the world is essentially a placeholder for freedom, right? Like if it's money that we want, if it's, fame, if it's, love, if it's attention, all of those things are the things we're looking for because that we feel like when we get that thing, we'll be free, right? And it's just like, interesting. So, again, another emotional gate lives in our solar plexus in the human design system. It's going to have lots of, it's known to be a very emotional gate, very loving, a lot of loving energy here, but also carries a fear of emptiness, right? So this looking for what we don't have again, right? This lack again.
In Hilary Barrett's translation of I Ching, the question she asked with this is, what are you called to do? And what decisions must you take because you're called to do this? So there's this abundance, but we're also forced to make choices because we can't make room for it all, right? We can't. And so it kind of reminds me of, the child that wants all the toys, right? But then when you're holding all the toys, you can't play with them. And so you have to make choices and go, okay, well, I'll put that down so I can do this. And it feels like we might be entering a time period where that's true, that we have to kind of set our priorities and decide what's really true for us.
Yeah, what's really important for us.
Yeah.
Because it's like in this with the freedom that's possible, and yet there's in this victimization, it's like we're putting ourselves in this prison, but not realizing that we're putting ourselves there by and large. And I know that this Gurdjieff, who was behind the Enneagram, spoke a lot about this sort of thing. And it's in that moment of actually when we actually get to see that we're in a prison, is that's the time we can get out and have the freedom. So all of these things that we think we have to have or want or need, like, are they really binding us down and getting in the way of where we naturally really need to go?
Yeah. And I think these are things that are easier often to see in others. And I
Okay.
think there are plenty of examples right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so, right. And so, like, when we're looking out and being like, what is it that motivates that person? Like, what they are the most free person that I can think of, and yet they clearly are not. They are stuck in patterns that, right, that hold them in prison. And victimization is exactly the right word. They're victims of their own, thing. And so, I think being able to see that outside is really helpful in order to be like, hey, where do I do that?
Yeah. I mean, that's always the question, isn't it, Christine? Because the minute we see it in someone else, we can be really sure that it's there in us. I didn't mention an extract for the other gene key, and I will go back to that. But for 55, I was really thinking of this abundance and feeling all the things, and again, making room, right? Because we're going to have to be making choices. And for me, what came up is olive, and olive is a really interesting extract that on a physical level works with making room in the veins, so that things can flow, because that's what this really is about a flow of abundance, allowing it to flow, making our decisions, and with that, embracing our freedom, right? Because it goes. So I think olive in a microdose for the nervous system might be really helpful. And if I could just go back to a minute, I was thinking about this fire on fire in gate 30, and there are actually two extracts that came up, but what seems to hold the strongest pull for me is oak. And this is interesting because when we put oak wood in a fire, we know we've got a slow burning, long burning fire. You compare oak with pine, you've got a completely different fire. But also oak as an extract gives that strength, that energy and staying power, the staying power to go ahead and pursue the dreams and feed them along the way. So I'll put those two out as an offering.
I love it.
Yeah. I was having one other thought about gate 50 in the sort of like with gate 30, there's this collective nature. In 55, there seems to be a collective nature in the drama aspect. And in that sort of where it's the world that we live in is informing us that these things are normal, right? So like we watch movies, listen to music, and it's there's so much drama, and so we get the idea that like with reality TV that somehow this is normal, and I think that feeds a certain element of this victimization pattern. And it's really hard for people to see their way past it because, well, that's what people are doing and gets them lots of attention.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, Lois, because in human design, gate 55 is what we call in an individual circuit, right? It's in this individual knowing circuit. And it is known to be dramatic, right? Like there's this high highs, low lows, lots of emotion, emoting, all of that. But I think, what you were talking about makes me think about how that outside world is actually conditioning us, right? So even though this energy 55 is very much about our own individual inner knowing, we are not really tapped into that so much, right? We're so deeply affected by what the collective is telling us and who we should be and how we should act and all of that, that all of that comes up. So again, this is a great opportunity to recognize this is a really individual energy. This whatever, February 19th to the 23rd, that's a supportive individual, like, hey, I see that, what's going on out there. What do I think of that, really? Like in my body, how do I feel about that?
Oh, I
And
like that.
not just what do you think about it.
Right.
Yeah, what do you feel, right? And I think that's probably the greatest gift we can give ourselves is tapping into our own feelings and learning what is right for us by the feeling in our body. And I know that's something that's taught through human design and promoted, but I think coming into that and going, oh yeah, I'm going to feel it here before any logic could work this out for me.
Yep. 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 And just paying attention to, and being connected to that, right? Like so many of us are disconnected from that, right? We go immediately to our head, right? And that's, again, by design, that's what we're taught. That's the world we live in. But that's, I think, one of the beauties of following this little transit journal is just like having the space and the recognition that, oh, that energy's like, I've got extra support this, whatever, 5.5 days, right? To really tap in to that brief, because it's brief, right? Sometimes you don't, it just flashes. I feel, and then you're already in your head.
Yeah. That's so true. I think it's important to note as we come to the end of these 5.5 days for gate 55. So what's that? Monday, the 23rd, that Mars is going direct. And so there's going to be this real push of energy because it's been retrograde this time to take action on whatever it is. So getting our feelings sorted out before that happens feels really important.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, so we don't jump into things that we really shouldn't.
Right, Lois? Because because that would never happen. Yeah, I think I'd love to just share with our audience that, I think everyone experiences these gates in their own way. There's this energy that comes in, and you could see it just within your own family, within your own peer group or colleagues. But understanding what your experience and tracking that is so powerful, in that we begin to learn more about ourselves in that process. Oh, this is how I experience freedom. This is what freedom feels like to me. And by taking those notes and keeping a journal, then it will be really interesting when it comes around next year, right? And you have perhaps a very different experience with what freedom feels like.
Yeah.
There's another interesting that it happens is that when we get more aware of what's going on for us, there's a corollary in noticing more about what's actually going on in other people. Yeah. Because we get more comfortable with us, and then just we're freer to experience what's actually going on.
Yeah. I had a great example of that in Gate 13, where the gene key dilemma is pessimism. And I swear to God, I woke up that first morning and for no reason, I was over everyone in my family. They were never going to do the thing I needed them to do. And that feeling lasted, but it dissipated, right? Like it slowly dissipated over the course of those 5.5 days. But that whole time, I was just like, these people, there's just no saving them. There's nothing to do with them, right? And it was so helpful to be like, wait, I think that's just that pessimism energy.
There's hope.
Right. And it really did. Like it kind of, we went into the next gate and I was kind of like, oh, I love these people. They're so wonderful.
Yeah, but Christine, thank you for sharing that. I think that that's so important. And it goes along with the theme of impermanence that you mentioned, Lois. I mean, it's just weather that really is what it is. And it's our experience with it. But greater than that is an opportunity to grow and learn something about yourself, which, your example is ideal there. And because the next time something like that happens, you'll go, oh yeah, I know, this passes, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
It may just take a little longer.
Or a lot longer. Right. But yeah.
Right. Well, it feels pretty complete today, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Love
Right.
it.
So we'll thank everyone for being with us and hope that you'll join us the next time.
Yeah, thanks so much.